Hey, you guys, are you ready? Because today is going to be a really fun episode. So, this is obviously our third time trying the premiere. I think that so far it's going really well. We have been out all day today, so please excuse the hair and so forth. It's also pouring down rain, but it has been so hot, and the air conditioning here in our house by the time we got back from the aquarium today is not working. So it is literally 84 degrees in the house right now. So forgive me if I look a little bit sweaty. George is back there trying to fix it. 85 degrees in this house, y'all. This is our last day here. We'll just put it that way. But we've had some issues with the air conditioning here. But anyway, I did get a brand new t-shirt. I didn't bring it out here with me, but I'll wear it on Friday. I can't remember if it was Vanessa or somebody else from the live chat. If it was you, let me know in the comments. Had posted that it would be a good idea, since I can't bring all my like fun t-shirts with me on this trip, to buy a t-shirt wherever we go on our travels. And then I can keep those t-shirts for later and make a quilt out of them or some other kind of like memory thing. And I thought that was a brilliant idea. So today when we were at the Moat Aquarium, I bought a manatee t-shirt because we saw an actual manatee at the aquarium. I don't know that I've ever seen one up close like that before. And it was so funny. I think I got it on film that Evie was standing by the glass, and here comes this manatee, and it like went fast enough that it like bumped its nose on the glass. And I guess the guy was saying that she does that a lot, or it might be manatee does that a lot. It's like giving people a kiss. And I just thought that was so cute. So I had to get the manatee t-shirt. So you guys will see that. And it'll be my first t-shirt of our fun adventure here. But man, it is hot. So I just forgive the way I look. But this is a really great episode today, and I cannot wait to read it. I think so far everybody has been enjoying the preview stuff. I can still be there with you guys in chat. Now, this one I'm recording on Tuesday, but we are leaving and going to a new house, our second Airbnb, tomorrow. So I'm not sure if I'll be available for the chat at 4, but hopefully you guys will see me in there. Again, let me know if this is working out for you. It's helping me, even if I'm there in the chat, because I can actually be still like tidying up or getting things done while it's going. Plus, it allows me on days that I'm going to be traveling to stay consistent with the schedule instead of having to stress out about whether we're going to get somewhere on time or if we're going to be checked into an Airbnb or anything like that. So it'll keep us moving along, because Spooktacular will be here before you know it. And I do still want to do some live episodes for that and some other fun stuff. So this will give me some of that leeway. So that'll be awesome. Now, today's episode is definitely hitting to the midpoint of the book, and you will definitely see why, because there is a very clear doorway that the characters are going through, and I'm sure you know what that's going to be, because in the last episode, Harper found out from Thule, who kind of suggested to her that there might be a portal back to Peachville through the White Rose Garden. And Harper sees in the middle of the night, she can't sleep, or it's early morning, she sees her father out there by the roses. And of course, he knew that she was going to come down there, because he ends up having the ring, the blue ring, in his pocket. So he's down there. He has a conversation with her, and he finally tells her a little bit more, opens up a little bit more about his relationship with her mother. And she finds out that her mom actually knew he was a demon, had been here to the castle to meet her, Harper's grandfather and all of this stuff. But she also finds out that her dad has lost so many people, like everybody he loved. And so he's kind of heartbroken in and of himself, and that he really feels like he has his duty to his people now. And that is what he's resigned himself to. And the order has taken so much from so many that he just can't imagine fighting back. And so this is kind of what Harper's purpose is here, is to say, well, I'm not going to leave Angela there, and we're not going to leave Airden there. We're going to go after them, even if it means we never come back. And she, in fact, says to her father, if you have something to say to me, you better say it now, or you may never get the chance, meaning I may never see you again. And that's pretty harsh words, right? But he's like, please don't go. Basically, he doesn't quite say that to her, but he's just like, this is a bad idea. But he doesn't tell her not to go. He doesn't tell her she can't. And when she asks for the ring back, he does actually give it to her, but he doesn't tell her he loves her. And she's not able to break through that hard, tough exterior that he has. But now we have reached the day where it is time to go back to Peachville. So what's going to happen when they get there? This is episode 10, chapter 40. I'll see you soon. Marianne and Essex sat on the floor of the bedroom, supplies and clothing spread out in front of them. They looked up as I entered. Hey, where have you been? Marianne asked. Talking to my father, I said. I clutched the blue ring tight in my fist. His silence still stung. It felt like a betrayal, an abandonment. My frown must have kept them from asking me a bunch of questions. Instead, they both turned back to their work, packing the 4 brown bags Essex had made for our journey. Where's Jackson? I asked. The bed had been made and there was no sign of him. I think he went back down to his room to get a few things. I walked over to where they sat and joined them. Is there anything I can do to help? I think we're just about done gathering all our supplies, but you can help us pack them all up, Marianne said. She handed me one of the backpacks. Everything's arranged in piles. Just take one of each and put it in the bag. We worked the rest of the morning to get ready, taking a short break when Thule brought in some muffins. In the afternoon, after all our work was done, Jackson and I took them on a tour of the domed city, introducing them to some of the friends I'd made over the past few months. I didn't tell anyone we were leaving, but I think many of the people knew. I could see it in their eyes and the way they held on to my hand just a moment too long. We made a special trip to the city's school to see Ryder. He was such a different child from that silent boy we'd found in the abandoned northern village. He laughed and played with the other kids, and watching him, you'd never have guessed he'd suffered such a great loss. I was going to miss him with all my heart. When we said goodbye, I pulled him close and hugged him tight. You be a good boy, okay? I promise, he said. He placed his small mouth near my ear and whispered, I'll see you soon. I stood and swiped at a tear as it rolled down my cheek. I smiled, hoping he hadn't seen. See you soon, I repeated. I brought my fingers to my lips and kissed, then placed them against his cheek. I love you. Love you too, he said with a toothy smile. He gave Jackson a hug too, then ran off to play with his friends. He seems sweet, Marianne said. That's the little boy you found all alone on your way here? I nodded, sniffing as I held back my tears. Come on, I said. It's getting late. We should head back to the castle and get something to eat. As we left the school, I glanced back and saw Ryder watching us from across the room. He placed his tiny fingers to his lips, then held them out toward me, something he had seen Jackson and I do 100 times. I touched my cheek as if to accept his kiss, then followed the others through the door. Chapter 41, The Tattoo. There was one last order of business before we could make our way through the portal. I had to get rid of my demon tattoo. I'm not looking forward to this, I said, pulling up the back of my shirt and laying down on the floor in my bathroom. Jackson held a mortar and pestle in his hand and was using it to crush up black rose petals. We don't have a choice, he said. If you step through that portal to the human world, Priestess Winter will know you're back. Worse, I said, she'll know where the portal is. That would put this whole town in danger. I knew there was no choice, but the idea of having a magical ink sucked from my skin made me feel sick. How do you even know how to do this? I asked. In the beginning of my time as a human, the Order tried to brand me with one of these marks, he said. They wanted to keep track of me and make sure they knew where I was and what I was doing at all times. He poured a little bit of water into the mortar and continued to mix up the paste. They did? I asked. I've never seen a tattoo on you before. He raised an eyebrow. Exactly. I laughed. You figured out a way to get rid of it? I found the room on the 3rd floor with all those spell books, he said. I used to go up there in the middle of the night and memorize the ingredients to different potions. The Order had stolen my magic, but that didn't mean I couldn't create a little bit of magic for myself here and there. I remembered the small closet in his room filled with different exotic ingredients. I'd gone there to make a potion of my own once upon a time. The tattoo is made from a special kind of ink, he said, a sort of magical tracking device. The power inside the black roses will suck the ink from your skin. I'm not going to lie. This is going to hurt. Great, I mumbled, laying my head down against my forearms. Let's just get it over with. When I rub the paste over the ink, you'll feel it move around and squirm, he said. You'll want to touch it, but you have to be careful not to itch or scratch or touch it at all, or the ink will soak into the skin on your hands. I nodded, getting nervous. As soon as the ink is completely gone, let me know, he said. I need to scrape the paste off with this stone and put it inside a living thing. That way, to the order, it will seem like you're still here in the dome. How will I know when the ink is gone? You'll know, he said with a laugh. Ready? I took 2 deep breaths in and out. Go, I said. I heard stone scraping against stone, then jumped as the cold paste hit my skin. He slathered it across the length of my lower back. Immediately, the ink began to wiggle and writhe, swirling around like a cat chasing its tail. Then it started to burn. I tensed and bit down hard. The heat seared my skin, and I felt the overpowering urge to move, to reach back and scrape the paste from my skin, but I knew I had to stay still. I had to wait. Just when I didn't think I could take it another second, the burning stopped. I sighed in relief and gave Jackson a thumbs up. Quickly, he used the stone to scrape the rose paste from my back and transfer it to the soil of a potted plant next to him. I sat up, grabbing a cold cloth from the floor beside me and placing it on the burned spot on my back. The plant trembled and shook, its leaves falling to the ground in a heap. Blue ink traveled up the length of its stalk. It swirled around, then finally settled, still and calm. I shuddered, thinking how that stuff had been inside me for months. Thanks, I said. I looked in the mirror and saw a large red burn across my skin. Don't worry, he said, placing his hand on the spot. That'll probably go away in a few days. Icy power ran up from his hand to my skin, relieving the burn. I took a deep breath in, praying I'd still be alive to find out. Chapter 42, Back to Peachville. Hours later, after the suns had gone down, the 4 of us gathered in my chambers. Essex handed each of us a backpack full of supplies. He reached into his own and pulled out a handful of blue wristbands. He placed one on his own wrist, then passed them around. These will be your keys to Marianne's village in the trees, he said. Then he handed me an extra one, for your sister. I am very much looking forward to meeting her. I smiled, grateful for his confidence and faith. I secured both bands around my wrist, right next to the white scrap of fabric that I'd worn for months, then took a final glance around the bedroom. Truly a room fit for a princess. I hoped Jackson was right and that someday we would come back to the shadow world, back to this castle. Ready? I asked, energy buzzing through my veins. Together, we stepped out onto the balcony. Thank you for coming with me, I said to them. I have no idea what we're going to face, but I am so grateful to have you by my side. Don't sound so nervous, Marianne said. We totally got this. I laughed, and she grabbed tight to Essex's hand. We stepped off the edge of the balcony and flew down to the garden below. We made our way through the gate and waded through the roses, careful not to crush them. As we walked, I felt a strange pull, almost magnetic. I followed the feeling until we came upon a small circle of roses tucked away in the farthest corner. It looked exactly like the entrance to the underground, except these roses were white. This had to be it. Was I really ready for what awaited me on the other side? I took a deep breath and tried to steady the galloping beat of my heart. Then I stepped into the circle and was sucked through the portal back to Peachville. Chapter 43, The Woman in the Wheelchair. In a breath, we stood at the edge of Brighton Lake. Toads and crickets and other tiny little beings went about their evenings as if nothing had changed. Nearby, something jumped from the water, then disappeared again beneath the surface. None of us said a word or dared to move. It felt strange to be back in the human world after all these months. I felt like a memory of myself. My hand drifted to my throat, where my mother's necklace should have been. Without it, there would be no Airden to protect me. For the first time, maybe I was strong enough to protect myself. I hugged Marianne and stared into her bright blue eyes, silently letting her know that this was where we parted ways. She nodded, then shifted into a black crow. She flew away, and Essex took off at a run, following her deep into the woods. Jackson grabbed my hand and squeezed. We walked along the worn path toward Shadowford. We passed the area above the ritual room, and I paused. I kind of wanted to go down the steps to look at the portal stone and see what it looked like now that the gate was inactive, but Jackson pulled me onward. The smaller house where Elamay lived was dark and quiet. It was the middle of the night here, so our hope in coming at this time was that everyone would be asleep and wouldn't notice our presence. So far, so good. Getting into Shadowford itself wouldn't be a problem. Manipulating locks was so easy at this point, it was second nature. We avoided the automatic light attached to the shed and came around to the back of the large white house. I quickly turned the lock with a flick of my hand, and we walked into the kitchen of Shadowford home. Only the sound of the air conditioner disrupted the silence. Jackson's eyes met mine. We'd made it safely into the house without a single issue. When we'd talked about this day, we'd considered every possibility, from an army waiting for us as we passed through the portal to a set of traps placed on the entryway to the house. The fact that it had been so easy to get this far made me uncomfortable. Where was the order? It had only been a few days since they'd taken my sister, but that was plenty of time to create a plan and to set up traps for me. My nerves hung on edge. Danger lay in front of us. I just didn't know when or where. It was the not knowing that made me queasy. Jackson and I tiptoed through the kitchen, down the hall past Mrs. Shadowford's room, and finally up the large wooden staircase to the second floor. About halfway up, one of the stairs creaked, and I winced, frozen in place as I waited. Nothing in the house moved. After a moment, I kept going, keeping my steps as light as possible. Once upstairs, I headed straight to my old room. I stared openly, surprised to find it looked exactly the same. I don't know why I'd expected it to look any different. Maybe because I had changed so much since I'd last been here. Jackson kept an eye on the hallway as I went to the dressing table and reached for the drawer where I kept the butterfly pin. For a split second, panic filled my heart. What if it wasn't here? What if someone had taken it? But when I opened the drawer, there it was, the white box. My hand trembled as I reached for it, knowing there was a possibility this was the trap we'd been waiting for. Could Sarra be trusted? Just in case, I closed my eyes and created a connection to the human side of my power, feeling the hum of the earth beneath me. To make sure I had control of my magic, I opened my eyes and held out my palm. A perfect orb of dim light formed instantly, illuminating the area in a circle around me. I carefully picked up the box, not willing to believe Sarra could be evil like her mother. I set it on the mirrored dressing table and pulled the top off. Nestled in a bed of white fluff, the blue butterfly sparkled. No monsters came out of the woodwork, and no witches came flying through the doorway. I let out a sigh of relief. I picked up the pin and moved it from side to side, watching as the blue crystals glittered in the dim light of my orb. What was so important about this piece of jewelry? Why did Sarra want me to wear it now? I had no idea what kind of power or magic these stones held, but she'd taken an awful risk to remind me of it. If her mother or her sisters had seen her give the secret code or note to Coach King, she would have been in serious trouble. This butterfly had to be something special. I gathered a small section of hair near my temple and slid the butterfly pendant over it. In the mirror, I recognized the image from Jackson's drawing. Proof that one way or another, I was exactly where I was meant to be. Let's get out of here, Jackson whispered. Anything else you need to grab while we're here? If so, let's get it and go. I glanced around. There was nothing here I felt all that connected to. Hand-me-down clothes, scraps of ribbon, my cheerleading uniform. It was all part of my old life, as if it was a different girl who lived here once upon a time. No, I said, shaking my head. I don't need any of this stuff. We should try to get upstairs then before it gets too late and everyone starts waking up, he said. With quiet steps, we walked into the dark hallway. Immediately, something felt off. As soon as I stepped out of the room, an ice-cold chill ran down my spine. Jackson must have felt it too, because his eyes grew wide as saucers and his lips parted. I spun and looked down the length of the stairs at the woman in the wheelchair. Her eyes glowed a deep blue, dark as midnight on the ocean. "Welcome home, Harper," Mrs. Shadowford said. Very slowly, with deliberate movement, she placed both hands on the armrests of her chair. Then she stood up. Chapter 44. You left me here to rot. I took a step back. Jackson gripped my arm. "Did you know she could walk?" I shook my head. "I had no idea," I said, "but I don't like this one bit." Without taking her eyes from my face, she began to make her way up the stairs. Her steps were slow, but focused. "I don't either," Jackson said. "I think we should go." "Where?" I asked. "I'm not leaving this house until I've gone through the hall of doorways. If we go up there, she'll just follow us." I planted my feet firmly on the floor, steadying my nerves and readying for battle. "If she's coming after us, we'll just have to stand and fight. I mean, she's a witch, but she's also an old lady. There's two of us. We'll just stun her or lock her in somewhere and head upstairs. It'll be fine." I was impressed with how confident I managed to sound, despite the fact that my knees were jelly. The old lady had creeped me out from the moment I first saw her. I definitely did not want to stand here and wait for her to attack me. But if I was going to do this thing, I was going to do it 100%. No backing down, no matter how scared I got. Mrs. Shadowford placed her foot on the top step, then lifted herself level with the two of us. "I've been waiting for you," she said. "To be honest, I'm surprised to see you here, so eager to fight, so naive and completely out of your league. I thought you would be too scared to come back, but it looks like Priestess Winter was right about you." "I'm not afraid of you," I said. Not exactly a true statement, but I desperately wanted it to be true. She laughed at me then, a full-toothed belly laugh that echoed through the hallway. Inside her mouth, her teeth were black and filled with a stench that hovered in the air like sewage. It was almost as if something inside her had begun to decay. My stomach turned, and I had to struggle to keep from retching. "You stupid girl," she said, licking her lips with her black tongue. "You should be very afraid of me. I may have been created to be a servant to your kind, but I can kill you just as easily as I could have protected you." "Protected me?" I asked, narrowing my eyes at her. "When did you ever protect me?" Mrs. Shadowford gripped the top of the banister with one hand as if to steady herself. "I never got a chance to protect you." A greenish liquid dribbled from the side of her wrinkled mouth as she spoke. "Your mother took you from me before I even knew you existed. She made me what I am, this old bag of bones. Then you left me here to rot." She leaned over and spit, the dark green fluid dropping to the ground with a slick, wet sound that brought the bitter taste of bile to the back of my throat. What the hell happened to her? "I don't know what you're talking about," I said. "My leaving didn't have anything to do with you." "You stupid girl." She snarled at me, her teeth covered in grime. "You defy the order when you don't even know the first thing about how the order works." "I know enough," I said. She laughed then, a grotesque growl of a laugh that made the floorboard shake beneath my feet. "Trust me." She ran the back of her hand across her lips, smearing green ick across her cheek. "You've barely scratched the surface. There are secrets and truths that go deeper than you could ever imagine." Something in the craziness of her eyes sent fear racing through my body. I'd always assumed Mrs. Shadowford was just a cranky old lady who'd inherited this house because she married my mother's uncle. I thought her only authority came from the fact that she ran this home for troubled girls. Now, I was beginning to question if I'd completely underestimated her this whole time. I would have been faithful to you, she said, hunching over slightly. A faithful servant. I would have given you everything you ever wanted if only you had been a good girl and done what you were told. Instead, you left me with nothing but this body falling apart like a rotting corpse. She laughed again, bending so far over that her body contorted into a strange crouch. She'd gone completely mad, her eyes focused on me with wild clarity. She didn't even blink or look away for 1 second. My instinct was to step away from her, to run, but I couldn't leave. There was no way I was leaving here tonight until I'd found my sister. She opened her mouth in a silent scream. Her head rolled back as her jaw opened wider and wider, coming unhinged as her wrinkled face split in two. She shed her skin like a snake, letting it fall to the ground in a withered heap. I stepped back until my back hit the wall with a thud. Jackson gripped my hand and our eyes met in terror. I had no words for the monster that stood before me. Its skin was scaly and green, glistening with wet goo. At first, it appeared as a pillar, stick straight. Then, where Mrs. Shadowford's legs used to be, 8 clawed legs skittered across the floor, hinged like a spider. Its head held glossy blue eyes, and from her back, a long tail with a sharp stinger curled up toward the ceiling. Beneath the monster, the pile of skin melted away into the floorboards, the stench of decay overwhelming as Mrs. Shadowford's body dissolved. The new thing that had taken her place was like something out of a horror movie. Definitely not human, definitely not demon. I'd never imagined anything like it, not even in my worst nightmares. It seemed like a cross between a scorpion and a spider, only huge. Jackson stepped in front, putting himself between me and the monster. If you want to get to Harper, you'll have to go through me, he said. He lifted his left hand, and it began to glow a bright, icy blue. Frost formed on his fingertips. The monster opened its mouth and hissed. Its teeth were jagged points that looked exactly like they could tear through the toughest metal without a second thought. It reared its head back, then thrust forward, heading straight for Jackson's chest. Jackson pushed his energy toward the monster's head, encasing it in ice. She staggered backward. We have to get out of here, Jackson said, gripping my arm. I stared at the grotesque monster as it flung its head from side to side. The ice around it had already begun to melt and drip onto the floor. We can't go anywhere, I said. I placed my hand over his for a second. We have to get upstairs tonight, or she'll tell them we were here. It will spoil everything. We have to fight this thing. I had only looked away for a second, but that was long enough for her to regroup and lash out at me. One sharp claw embedded into my right thigh. Pain ripped through me, and I fell to my knees. I pressed my hand against the wound. Blood oozed through my fingers. The monster retracted her claw, then struck again. My brain was seconds behind the action. I couldn't react fast enough. Jackson lunged toward me, shifting just as his hand touched my skin, bringing me with him as he flew down the stairs and into the foyer. He slammed the door behind us and quickly pushed the couch against it. That should give us a few seconds, he said. Let me see that wound. I lifted my fingers and winced as he ripped a wider hole in my jeans. He pressed firmly against the gaping hole the monster had left in my thigh, then closed his eyes. I couldn't shift fast enough, I said. Damn it, why didn't I fight back? Shh. Jackson's face was tight. I opened and closed my hands. He needed to hurry. A couch wasn't going to hold that thing for long. Bitter cold flared up in my thigh, and the pain slowed. When Jackson took his hand away, the bleeding had stopped, but the skin was raw. Better? Yes, I said, but now what? This thing is bad, Harper. He threw a nervous glance at the barricaded door. I've never faced one myself, but I know Leah and the other shadow demons have fought something like her before. They called it a green scorpion, and now I understand why. Thick claws clacked against the stairs. My chest tightened. What did they say about it? It has venom in its tail, like a real scorpion, he said. If it gets into your system, it paralyzes you. I scooted back. The scorpion had reached the bottom of the stairs and was now clawing at the wooden door. Did they mention how to kill it? That's why I told you we should run, Jackson said. They said they couldn't kill it. Its body is covered with a thick outer shell that acts like armor. The pincer on the end of one of her front legs crashed through the door, splintering it into tiny pieces. Then we have to destroy the shell, I said. The thing that used to be Mrs. Shadowford destroyed the rest of the barrier and crawled into the room, climbing onto the couch, stinger raised. Her glassy blue eyes moved from me to Jackson and back again. I filled my lungs slowly, hearing my father's voice in my head. The only way to get ahead of the moment was to let go of my fear, anticipate, act instead of react. I pushed fear thoughts into a box in my mind and closed it. I didn't have time for worry. I didn't have time to wait for her to attack. Instead, I shifted, white smoke filling the air where my body used to be. The transition took my breath away. I'd used my demon power in the shadow world, but it felt completely different here. Instead of charging my power from the ground and deep roots beneath the surface, I pulled from more immediate things. I felt energy soar at me from every living thing nearby, including the scorpion itself. I sucked it in and became full with it, flying faster than I ever had before. I hurled myself toward the scorpion, sending a rope of smoke around her neck and squeezing. The monster bucked and pulled. I stumbled and almost lost my hold, but a second smoky rope joined mine, coiling around her neck. Jackson's black smoke. I glanced at him, and he was human, then demon, then human again. Charcoal-colored smoke hung like a haze around the room. I gasped as his demon form came into view. In the shadow world, I'd taken a potion to make all demons appear human, but the potion didn't work here. I wasn't prepared for what I saw. I lost my concentration and stared at a mix between a winged gargoyle and a horned beast. "Harper!" he shouted. Jackson took human form again and pointed to the sharp stinger coming straight for my head. I let go of my hold on the scorpion and shifted just before she sank her stinger into my skin. I reappeared behind her, then created fire in my palms. Red-orange flames burned around my hands. I reached out and grabbed the scorpion's tail. She screeched as it burned through her outer shell. The stink of barbecued flesh filled the air. Hope rushed through me. If I could destroy the shell, maybe I could kill the monster. With a strong whip of her tail, she lifted me from the ground and sent me flying across the room. I shifted just before my head hit the wall, flew down the length of the wallpaper, and landed safely on the floor. Dizziness overcame me for a moment, but I knew I had to recover fast before she got a chance to strike me again. I cartwheeled across the room, thankful for the first time in my life for my cheer training as the scorpion's claws sank into the floor where I had stood only moments before. "Freeze her," I shouted. Jackson lifted his hands and threw a blue light at the scorpion. Popping sounds filled the room as ice crept across the scorpion's body, starting at its tail and ending with its upraised head. I had seen him fight this way before, and I knew someone encased in ice could be shattered and killed. I looked around for a weapon to use to shatter her before she thawed. I reached for the piece of splintered door, ripping it from the rest of the wood. I aimed for the beast's neck, then threw the makeshift stake as hard as I could. The sound of breaking glass filled the room as my weapon hit just below my mark. One of the scorpion's monster's legs shattered and broke away from its body. She thawed quickly and skittered toward me despite her missing leg, mouth open in an angry scream. I jumped up, shifting just enough to hang in the air above her like a fog, my human form still visible. I sent a stream of hot flame down on her back, feeding it with more and more power. The scorpion's protective shell began to disintegrate in the extreme heat. Underneath, her skin glistened and bubbled. She jerked her flaming head violently. I struggled to keep the flame going, but my power was drained. Just when I thought I couldn't keep going, a girl appeared in the broken doorway. Her long blonde hair covered part of her face, but I recognized her instantly. Courtney. Her hands glowed red, and she motioned for me to come to her. I flew across the room, reforming beside her. She placed both of her hands on my arm, and energy poured into me like a waterfall. With renewed power, I strengthened the flames that surrounded the monster. Jackson lifted dead flowers from a pink vase near the window, then tossed the moldy water onto the floor. He pulled his fingers together and lifted the water from the ground as if it were a string he could lift up in a straight line. He formed a long spear with the water, then blew his icy breath against it, freezing it in an instant. He lifted the ice spear and thrust it forward. Without its shell, the monster was vulnerable. The spear sank deep into its flesh, right where its heart should be. The fire melted the weapon on contact, but it had done its job. The scorpion lifted her body into the air like a bucking horse, then fell flat against the pine floors, acid bubbling from its neck as dark green blood gushed onto the floor. The monster's limbs seized, shaking violently before finally going still and cold. Mrs. Shatterford was dead. And we're back to Peachville. We are back in Peachville, and what an entrance. So no army waiting for them, but Mrs. Shatterford, who has been this creature all along for many years, has shown her true form and has now been killed. So this is kind of the guardian of the gate, so to speak. And a lot of times in fiction, that kind of gate guardian and that doorway will sometimes be something that happens at the end of the first act, not the end of the second act. But I originally, when I was planning this story, I was thinking that they would go back to Peachville and this would be the gate guardian at the first act. And so it would be into the new world, back to Peachville at the end of the first act. But when I was writing it, I realized that I needed more time with her father in the shadow world, and I need more time for her to go through all the things that she needed to go through, like the training and so forth. So this plot point got moved to the midpoint. And so this is kind of the beginning of what will be known as the midpoint scenes, really, this next couple episodes. And there's some really, so that was one of the first kind of like twists moments, so to speak. And next week, we're going to see some more big ones, particularly, I believe, on Wednesday. You're going to get a pretty good, what I think is like a good kind of coming back around sort of moment from a previous book, something that comes back around that we get to learn about, which I think is pretty cool. So hopefully you guys are enjoying the premiere. I know they're not quite as long as the original episodes, but I hope that you guys are definitely enjoying it. Please go ahead and leave a thumbs up. I saw just now when I was looking at Tuesday's premiere, which is actually coming up in about 15 minutes, that there was already a downvote on it before it even went live. So I don't know who's doing stuff like that, but if you could go ahead and leave your positive vote to cancel out some of those negative people who just want to, I don't know what purpose there would be in leaving a downvote, but either way, it's interaction. So thank you even to the downvote person for being here. Thank you guys so much for being a part of this premiere. We are 10 episodes in and we have 12 left to go, and they are action packed. So now that we have gotten through the training and the emotional part of her with her father, now we are into the thick of it. And pretty much the entire rest of the book, almost every single episode has some major information, piece of the puzzle, or twist or reveal that's coming for leading us toward the end of the book. So there is lots of exciting stuff to come. Again, if you wanted to read ahead, you can pick up Demons Forever pretty much everywhere: Google Books, Apple Books, Amazon, Barnes & Noble, Kobo Books. Go grab it. I think you can even get it at Walmart eBooks. So go grab it. Might even be at your library in Overdrive. So go give that a check out if you would like. And we will be back next week. I will see you guys on Friday for my first coffee chat from Madeira Beach. And then next week we will have episodes 11 and 12, but there will be no coffee chat on Friday because I will be at the NINC conference speaking about how to start a YouTube channel. So that's going to be super fun. But I have really loved you guys being here for this. I really appreciate it. Don't forget to leave your thumbs up or subscribe if you're new. You can listen to the entire Shadow Demons Saga up to this point. Books 1 through 5 are completely here. So go check my playlist if you're new to the channel. Otherwise, I will see you guys on Friday. Bye for now.